If you close your eyes and try to imagine the beginning, you will fail. Not because you are not smart, but because the beginning was not like anything you have ever seen. There were no trees, no sand, no houses, no roads, no birds flying across the sky. There was only water, endless water. Above the water was the wide, silent sky. No clouds, no sun rising or setting. Just a great, open space stretching farther than any eye could see. And in that great sky lived the Supreme One, Olodumare. Olodumare watched the wide water below and knew something was missing. The world had space. The world had water. But it had no ground. No place for feet to stand. No place for life to grow. And so, Olodumare decided it was time. Time for land. Time for people. Time for a world that would breathe and move and speak. But Olodumare would not do it alone. Among the heavenly beings was one who stood out. Calm. Gentle. Wise. Always dressed in white. His thoughts were clear. His heart was steady. His name was Obatala. Obatala was not the loudest. He was not the quickest to anger. He was patient. He listened before he spoke. When others argued, he stayed quiet and watched. Olodumare called him forward. Obatala, the Supreme One said, "The time has come. The world below needs land. It needs form. It needs people." Obatala bowed his head. "I will do as you command." Olodumare gave him sacred tools. A long golden chain that reached from the sky to the waters below. A snail shell filled with fine sand. A white hen with strong claws. A palm nut. Each item had a purpose, though the meaning was not explained fully. Some things must be discovered, not told. Obatala carried the items carefully. He did not rush. He did not boast to others. He simply prepared. Before leaving, he looked once more at the peaceful sky he had always known. Soon, everything would change. He stepped toward the edge of heaven and held the chain. Slowly, carefully, he began to climb down. The sky grew distant above him. The water grew larger below him. The air felt different the lower he went. Thicker. Heavier. Still silent. When his feet could go no further, he stopped. Below him was only water, moving gently but without direction. This was the moment. He opened the snail shell and poured the sand onto the surface of the water. The sand did not sink. It spread, floating like a small island. Then he released the white hen. The hen landed on the sand and began to scratch. Scratch to the left. Scratch to the right. Its claws pushed the sand outward. It moved again. And again. The small island began to grow wider. The sand spread further and further until solid ground began to form. Land rose out of water. For the first time, something firm existed beneath the sky. Obatala stepped down from the chain and placed his feet on the land. It was soft at first. Fresh. New. Untouched. He walked across it slowly, looking around. "This is good," he said quietly. The place would later be known as Ile-Ife. But at that moment, it was simply the first land. Obatala planted the palm nut into the soil. In time, it would grow into a tall palm tree. From that one tree, many others would grow. Life was beginning. But the work was not finished. Land was formed. Trees would grow. But there were no people. No voices. No laughter. No hands to build or create. Obatala knew his next task. He would shape human beings. He knelt on the new earth and touched the soil. It was soft clay beneath his fingers. Carefully, gently, he began to mold it. A head. Arms. Legs. A body. He walked slowly, shaping each detail with care. He smoothed the face. Formed the nose. Pressed small lines where eyes would be. He did not rush. Each figure mattered. When he finished shaping many forms, he returned to the sky and asked Olodumare to breathe life into them. Olodumare agreed. One by one, the figures began to move. Chest rising. Eyes opening. Feet shifting on the new earth. The first human being stood on the land of Ile-Ife. They looked around in wonder. They did not know fear yet. They did not know hunger. They only knew that they were alive. Obatala watched them with quiet joy. But the story was not as simple as it sounds. Because even the wise can stumble. And even those chosen for great tasks can make mistakes. And that mistake would change everything. At first, everything was calm. The land was fresh. The air felt clean. The first people walked slowly across the earth, touching trees, staring at the sky, learning what it meant to exist. Obatala watched them closely. He did not see himself as their master. He saw himself as their guardian. Every day, he shaped more bodies from clay. He worked with patience, kneeling on the soft ground of Ile-Ife, molding arms and legs, smoothing foreheads, pressing careful lines where mouths would speak. He would finish his work and carry the lifeless forms to the presence of Olodumare, who would breathe life into them. And so the earth slowly filled with people. They built small shelters from branches. They learned to gather fruit. They began to speak to one another. Laughter was heard for the first time. And yet, even in a new world, temptation waits quietly. One afternoon, while Obatala was preparing to shape more bodies, he felt tired. Creation is beautiful work. But it is heavy work. The sun was warm. The air was still. He wiped his hands and stepped away from the clay to rest. Nearby, some of the early settlers were preparing palm wine. They had discovered that the sap from the palm tree, when left for a time, could change. It would become strong. It would make the head light and the body warm. They offered him some. At first, Obatala refused. He was known for self-control, for purity, for clarity of mind. But the day had been long. It is only a small drink, one voice said. He hesitated. Then he accepted. The first sip burned slightly. The second felt smoother. By the third, warmth spread through his chest. The world felt softer. The sounds around him seemed distant. The ground did not feel as steady. He returned to his clay. He told himself he was fine. He began shaping a new figure. But his hands were not as steady as before. The clay slipped slightly beneath his fingers. The arm came out thinner than he intended. He pressed harder to correct it. The shape changed again. His eyes were not seeing clearly now. His head felt heavy. The careful balance he once had was gone. Still, he continued. He molded body after body in this state. When he finished, he stepped back, breathing deeply. The figures stood before him, waiting for life. He carried them to Olodumare. As always, Olodumare breathed life into them. One by one, they opened their eyes. But this time, something was different. Some stood tall and strong. Others struggled to stand. Some had limbs that did not move the way others did. Some could not see clearly. Some could not speak as others did. There was silence. The new people looked around, confused but alive. Obatala stared. The fog in his mind began to clear. He looked at the bodies. He looked at the way some walked differently. He looked at the hands that trembled. And in that moment, he understood. It was not the clay. It was not Olojime. It was him. He remembered the palm wine. His heart sank. He fell to his knees. I have made a mistake, he whispered. He felt shame, deep and heavy. Not because the people were alive, but because he had not given them his best. He had allowed weakness to guide his hands during a sacred task. He turned to Olojime. I was careless, he said. I allowed my mind to lose focus. I did not guard myself. Olojime did not shout. The Supreme One did not strike him down. Instead, there was a long silence. Finally, Olojime spoke. Every action carries weight, the voice said calmly. But life is life. These people are not mistakes. They are part of the world now. Obatala bowed his head lower. I will never drink again, he said firmly. From this day forward, I will protect those whose bodies are not like others. I will stand beside them. I will defend them. And he kept that promise. From that time, Obatala wore white more than ever before. White for purity. White for self-control. White for clarity. He refused palm wine completely. And he became known as the protector of those born different. Not as punishment, but as responsibility. He visited the homes of those who struggled to walk. He comforted parents who did not understand why their child was not like others. He reminded them, they are alive. They have spirit. They have purpose. Over time, people began to see something powerful. Those who were different often carried deep wisdom. Some who could not see clearly with their eyes saw deeply with their hearts. Some who could not walk far had patience others lacked. Some who spoke slowly chose their words more carefully. The world began to understand that difference did not mean less. Obatala's mistake had brought pain to his heart. But it also brought compassion into the world. And yet, while this was happening on earth, another story was unfolding in heaven. Because there were other beings watching. Among them was Oduduwa. And not everyone believed Obatala should have led creation alone. Whispers began to rise. Should someone who failed continue to lead? Was the earth completed properly? The land is good, but could it have been better? The peace that once filled heaven began to shift. And Obatala would soon face not only regret, but rivalry. The earth was no longer empty. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children ran across open land. Voices filled the air of Ile-Ife. What began as wet sand and silence had become a living place. And still, high above, the heavens watched. Among those watching was Oduduwa. Oduduwa was strong-willed, bold. He believed leadership required firmness and order. Where Obatala was gentle and slow to speak, Oduduwa was direct and decisive. Some say that when Obatala once delayed his mission because of palm wine, it was Oduduwa who stepped forward to complete part of the work of organizing the land. Other traditions tell it differently. But what matters is this. A question began to grow. Who should rule the earth? Obatala had shaped the bodies of humans. He had walked the first land. He had made a mistake, and repented. Oduduwa believed leadership should not belong to someone who had failed, even once. The disagreement did not begin with shouting. It began quietly. Small conversations. Careful words. Supporters gathering on both sides. The early people of Ile-Ife looked up to both figures in different ways. They respected Obatala for his calm spirit. They admired Oduduwa for his strength and vision. Tension grew like a storm that has not yet broken. One day, the disagreement became open. Voices were raised. Not with insults, but with conviction. Obatala believed leadership must be guided by purity and patience. Oduduwa believed leadership must be guided by authority and structure. Neither saw himself as evil. Both believed they were right. The conflict became so serious that it led to struggle. Not a wild, uncontrolled fight, but a clash of influence and power. In some tellings, Obatala was overcome. In others, he stepped back willingly to prevent destruction. But in the end, Oduduwa took a leading role in ruling the land. And Ile-Ife became known not only as the place of creation, but as the cradle of kings. From Oduduwa, traditions say, came royal lines, crowns, thrones, dynasties. Yet Obatala was not erased. He was not forgotten. He did not disappear in shame. Instead, something deeper happened. Obatala chose peace. He could have fought endlessly. He could have turned his pain into bitterness. But he had already learned what pride and weakness could cause. He stepped back from political power and stepped deeper into spiritual authority. He became the symbol of moral leadership. Not the kind that rules with force, but the kind that guides with character. People still came to him. Not for crowns. Not for titles. But for clarity. When disputes rose between neighbors, they asked, what would Obatala say? When leaders grew harsh, elders reminded them of his patience. When children were born different, families called on his name for comfort. White cloth became sacred in his honor. White beads. White chalk. White garments during rituals. White meant clean heart. Clear mind. Self-control. In time, something powerful became clear. Oduduwa represented kingship, the structure of society. Obatala represented conscience, the soul of society. And a nation needs both. Without structure, there is chaos. Without conscience, there is cruelty. The story was never about who was stronger. It was about balance. Years passed. Generations were born and buried in the soil of Ile-Ife. The palm trees grew tall. Markets formed. Families multiplied. The earth that began with a snail shell of sand became a center of culture and belief. And through it all, the lesson of Obatala remained. Even the wise can fall. Even the chosen can fail. But what matters is what happens after the mistake. Obatala did not deny what he did. He did not blame the clay. He did not blame the people who offered him drink. He accepted responsibility. And he changed. That is why his story survived. Not because he was perfect, but because he chose humility. Today, among the Yoruba people of Nigeria and beyond, his name is still spoken with respect. He is remembered as the molder of human bodies, the guardian of those born different, the symbol of purity, the calm voice in times of conflict. And Ile-Ife is remembered as sacred ground, the place where land first touched water, where clay first became flesh, where breath first filled human lungs. If you walk there today, you will see ordinary streets, cars, shops, people going about their daily lives. But beneath the surface of that city lives a memory older than buildings. A memory of water and sky, of sand poured from a shell, of a hand scratching the first earth into shape, of a leader who stumbled and rose again wiser. That is the story of Obatala. Not a story about perfection, but a story about responsibility. Not a story about power alone, but a story about character. And perhaps that is why it has never been forgotten.